And we're recording, and welcome to yet another Sunday evening at the Nine-Sided Circle, where we will talk about fun, interesting, and amazing things. Tonight's topic is going to be a thing called Mukaddes Okuma, which in Turkish means something along the lines of sacred reading. This is the method by which one can read and learn from, or listen and learn from, for that matter, things like Sufi stories, the teachings of the great masters, any of the sacred texts. This is one of the preferred methods of doing it. Now, I'm pretty sure that the Sufis lifted this pretty much whole cloth from the Christian monastics, because they were doing this, or a form of this, as early as the 3rd century. They do this thing called Lectio Divina, which means divine readings, and it was considered the way to read the scriptures. The monastic method is a little less elaborate than this, and it doesn't fit on an enneagram. This is more elaborate, fits on an enneagram. And just for fun, I gave you all of the Turkish names, or I'm going to give you all of the Turkish names to go along, because that's how I originally learned it. And this is a 7-step process. And the first step to it, before I leap into the how to do it, are there any questions about this? Like, why would I want to do this, or any of that sort of thing? Thoughts?
Is this related to the word ta'wil? Ta'wil in
A little bit, yeah. But since I learned it in Turkish, and I don't know all of the Arabic words, I'm kind of stuck with the Turkish. Ah, Nick is here too. Good. All right, so the first step is called okumak. Okumak means to read. And this isn't just sitting down and reading a book. There's actual preparation in this step. This is, this would be the 1 point on the Enneagram for this. And so this is a preparation point. So what you want to do is, let's say you have the Masnavi and you want to read it, or you have one of Ibn al-Arabi's books. So the first thing you do is you sit down and you still your mind. You enter into a state of mindfulness. You do your breathing. You get yourself very, very centered. And when you feel calm and centered and the voices in your head are quiet, then you slowly, carefully, and methodically, and with full awareness, read the text. Only read so far as you can hold your attention. If your attention starts to drift, you need to stop. And then cycle back several lines or paragraphs, whatever it takes to get back to where you were paying attention. Go back into a state of mindfulness, go back into a state of presence, and pick up your reading again. It is good to stop between paragraphs while doing this and take a few proper Sufi type breaths. You all know how to do that by now. And you do that until you finish reading the section of text that you want to read. And it can be short or long. It can be a Nasruddin story. It can be a surah from the Quran. It's all handled the same way. The second step, in Turkish, it's called düşünmek, which means to meditate. And they say that you let what you've read slip through your mind as a string of pearls slips through your fingers. You just think of what you've read, be aware of it, examine it from different perspectives. Don't try and rationalize anything, just be with it. Now, the third step, called duaja, means seeking inspiration. Literally, it's from the Arabic word dua, which means prayer. So after you have let your mind envelop the material in your reading, then you sort of lift it up to whatever you understand as a higher power or a higher state, whether you think of that as God or your higher self or your deep unconscious. I don't care. It's just got to be something outside of and greater than the level of your conscious mind. You open yourself up to that which is greater than yourself. You sit in presence and you ask for inspiration. You kind of send out the call to be inspired to understand what it is that you have read. Once you have really gotten into that state, the fourth part of the practice is called seretime, which means watching. You literally just in your mind's eye look at the story. You don't comment on it. You don't think about it. You just witness it. You enter into a state of self-witnessing and story witnessing at the same time. And you just let that happen until the inspiration comes, whether it's a minute or an hour, it doesn't matter. When you get whatever inspiration you get, and it doesn't matter how big, how small, you get to the fifth step, which is called yazmak, which means to write or to record. You record what you have learned. Like I said, big, small. Doesn't matter, but it should be written down or recorded in some form. Once you've done that, you get to the sixth point, which is called katulmak, which means to join or to share, to participate. That's where you sit down with your teacher or your work group and you discuss your understandings of the reading that you've done. You give people as close to your insight as you can get in words. You explain to them what it is that you've learned. And that gets to the hardest part, the 7th point, which is dinleme, which means listening. Once you've explained your insight, you listen to the feedback that you get from your teachers, from your fellow students, from your fellow seekers. You take in all the new information, even if you don't understand it, even if it doesn't fit with what you understand, even if you disagree with it. You listen to everything, not uncritically, but unjudgmentally. Now, at this point, when you've hit 7, you have completed the octave of the reading. And you, as the student, return to point 1 to read again and go through this process again. But to lay this out on an Enneagram requires 2 more points and two steps. the 8 point and the 9 point, or the 9/0 point. So you have finished gaining whatever insight you've gained, and you as the student move to point 1 again, but the circle, the outer circle of your process, goes to point 8, which is called anlama, which means understanding or insight. This is what you acquire through this process, and you literally take that understanding and insight and incorporate it into your knowledge at this point. And the last bit, the 0 and 9, is called ruhani bilge, which means gnosis. It literally means spiritual information. But we usually translate it as gnosis, direct knowledge that is given to you through a process of deep understanding, rather than book learning or listening to other people talk or any of this kind of stuff. And that's both the entering shock, because at 0, that's what you want. That's what puts you in front of the book that you're going to read, or the story that you're going to read, or the Nasruddin tale that you are going to listen to. And that is the ending shock that opens up an entirely new Enneagram for different things. So let me see if I can pull up this, because can everybody see this?
No.
It said 9-sided circle has started screen sharing. It doesn't show anything yet, though.
There it is.
Okay, it took a moment. It's a fairly high def image, though. So this is what the Enneagram of this looks like, and I will put this Enneagram where you can all get it, so that you can have a copy yourself. But you will notice here that all of the moving lines come into play as you look around. The process that we went through just now is the outer circle here.
Yep.
But we also have the moving lines and the shock points. So can anybody look at this and tell me anything of significance that you see? How about the shock points? What do you see at the shock points?
Seeking, sharing, and gnosis.
Yes. One of the first things that I notice about this is it seems like the seeking and the sharing should be reversed, but it's not, for a couple of reasons. The first shock, which is the intentional shock, is you actively seeking the inspiration. The second shock at 6 is actually a form of surrender, where by sharing your inspiration, you are surrendering your ownership of it. You are putting yourself out there. People could scoff at you. It's dangerous, and it requires that you completely surrender to the moment of doing this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nick comments that it aligns with the shock points of will and grace.
Yes.
And Aaron, in turn, says the shock points need the text and someone to share with outside objects.
Yes. So, taking a look at point 1, Reading connects to listening and watching. So if you are the little bee in the center, that's the first thing that you pay attention to. So just take a moment and look at the different connections that you get along the moving lines from the point of view of the teacher who is perhaps instructing their student in how to do this and helping them step through the process. What do you see?
So would this suggest that if, when you're waiting for the inspiration to be downloaded, so to speak, and it doesn't happen, then you need to go back to the meditation point? Is that the kind of thing that's going on here?
If you are seeking the inspiration and it doesn't happen, that means that you are not passing through the shock.
Okay.
If you're not passing through the shock, then that means that you are not opening yourself to outside energy. Remember, something has to come in from outside the process to facilitate the process at a shock point. So the meditation prepares you to accept that. But there is a sort of surrender at both of these points. You have to actively seek the inspiration, to call out for it. But then you have to be open to it.
Right. And so, but the being open part presumably is point 4. Or I mean, that, it would tell, the way you know that you were successfully open, presumably, is because you see something happening or not happening, which is presumably point 4, right?
I don't think so, actually. I think that you will feel the energy of the inspiration before you step into the watching.
Okay.
When I go through this process, and from last Wednesday to now, I have gone through this process multiple times to refresh my memory because I haven't done it in a while for whatever reason. And there is a change in state at 3 that facilitates 4. And that's what you're looking for, is the change in state, the feeling of inspiration, as if you are literally being breathed into.
But that's before the inspiration comes. In other words, I mean,
that's not before the inspiration comes. That is the inspiration.
Okay.
3 is seeking the inspiration. It comes there. That's what you do. You sit there until it comes. Then you move to 4 and watching.
Okay.
I'm not making myself clear enough on this, I think.
Okay. So basically, if there's nothing to watch, then you haven't finished step 3 yet. Basically, that's kind of what it comes down to, I guess.
No, if you don't get a change in state that makes you feel more open, then you are not ready to watch.
Right. Right.
There is the thing to watch. You get the thing to watch at 1.
Oh, I see.
You are watching what you read. You're watching the story or the text. So this at 4 in the Dance of the New Moon story, this is where if I'm teaching you to use that as an initiatory story, I tell you, sit as if you were the protagonist in the story. Put yourself in the semakhana and watch the dance. That's the watching point.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to do is relate. I mean, my experience is that there's a sort of like an aha cognition experience that happens at some point. And
This is different than that.
that's different from that. Okay.
Yeah, the aha experience comes before the material in a certain way. Not exactly before. The aha experience is actually up at 8. That's the insight.
I see. Okay.
But the inspiration that allows for that insight happens at 3.
And there's a certain thing that I'm aware of when that inspiration successfully happens. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's like pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Okay. But it's, it's something, something that I've become aware of, right? It's not something
Yes.
that it's assumed is sort of happening in the background, right? I mean, okay.
No, you feel a change in state. When you have entered into that inspired state, you actually feel the change in state.
Okay. Okay. So now that change of state is there, and now what am I watching then after that?
You are watching the story that you just read.
The story, back
You
and
are
back.
literally watching the material of the text, whether it's a story, whether it is Ibn al-Arabi's philosophy, whatever it is, you literally just watch it. You observe it without comment.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think it's getting a little clearer to me here. Thank you.
Okay, good questions. What else do we have? What can I make clearer? What can I make more confusing? I can be like Mr. G and make this much more confusing if you'd like.
So first of all, we had Ahmed who says, okay.
Yeah, with this up, I can't read any of the notes. So this is all, the notes are all on you, Kyle.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to comment. Okay, so Ahmed is asking, would the inspiration be related to the hidden meaning of what I was reading, batin, or could it be something else not related to the meaning of what I was reading?
It will be related to the hidden meaning of what you were reading. It will be the batin, yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because then he asks, meaning the process is meant to find the batin?
Yes.
Or just putting me in a state of gnosis?
No, the finding the batin is the state of gnosis.
Okay.
When batin is it means the hidden, and it's one of the names of God. And when you experience it directly, then you have gnosis. Now, I can tell you a hidden thing, and that's not gnosis. That is at best ilm, just book learning, knowledge.
Okay.
And we're looking at arif, which is something completely different. Arif is direct experiential knowledge.
Just typing those in.
Yes, please.
Them.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael will want to know how to spell them, so.
Okay, so then Nick says, it doesn't follow a causal chain, i.e. inspiration.
No, it does not follow a causal chain in the sense of a linear cause. This is a non-linear process.
Yep.
This process is both non-linear and non-local, which is kind of weird for something that is over 1,000 years old.
Okay, so then Aaron says, at point 4, is it seeing it in action, so to speak?
So to speak. And again, let me refer back to the Dance of the New Moon. Jorge is told to spend an hour sitting in the semakhana observing the dance every day for 28 days. So if you were watching that story, at this point, you would literally sit down and visualize the semakhana, see yourself there, see the dance, make it as experientially real as possible without without breaking the fourth wall, as it were. You want to live inside of the story and literally watch it from the inside out. These are very good questions because this is helping me clarify how to describe this stuff. So keep them up, folks.
Okay. Dave says, can there be a lag between 3 and 4 in clock time?
Yes.
So there's a couple visual things in here I'm trying to figure out how to say in words. So you go 1 to 3 and then proceed about your day or week, and then a recoil happens later from the 1 to 3 in the form of either actual idea insight entering the mind from somewhere different than normal, or in terms of the world presenting the answer, often in an amusing way.
Sometimes, yeah. That's a little bit outside of this process, but it can happen that way. The thing is, at 3, it's easiest for me to speak of this in its natural language. At 3, you remain in a state of prayer until you open to the inspiration. The prayer, the dua, is not begging God for stuff. It is focusing on opening yourself to the inspiration that is already there at all times. Does that make sense?
I didn't see if anyone nodded or not. My bad.
That's okay.
Okay, so Nick says yes.
Good.
Dave says yes, makes sense.
Good.
Okay. And
So what else do we see in this?
well, I have a comment from Nancy who says, I can't imagine myself not coming up with an interpretation almost as soon as I read the story. How would I hold off?
Practice. Come up with an interpretation, then throw it out.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. Some of this requires just flat out willpower.
So going from 4 to 5, then, what is it that I'm recording? I presumably haven't had the insight yet. I haven't. I mean, normally what I record is my cognition. This is a big insight. I'm going to write it down for posterity, etc. But
why are you assuming that you haven't had the insight?
Right. So, what? I'm sorry. Say again.
Why are you assuming that you haven't had the insight?
Because you just told me that. You told me the insight.
No, I didn't. No. No, the full insight isn't there. The knowledge that you're getting is happening at the 4 process. In the watching, you will be gaining certain insights. The insight is not fulfilled. The anlama, that point, you're not at that point yet. But the material to get you to that point is there. It just needs to be cooked.
Okay, so I'm beginning to have the insight at 4.
Yeah, you are gaining the knowledge.
Okay.
You're gaining the well, actually, to use Gurdjieff's term, you're gaining the understanding.
Okay.
Gurdjieff makes a distinction between understanding and knowledge.
Okay.
Knowledge, he says, is just memorizing words in a certain order. Understanding is grasping the inner meaning of something. So at 4, as you are watching, you are beginning to grasp the inner meaning of the stuff. Going from 4 to 5, crossing that equator means that that kind of stuff is beginning to cook, and you start recording the insights that you're getting. You start writing that stuff down after you've watched. So say you spend an hour sitting in the semakhana watching the dance. Then you sit down with a pen and paper and you write down what it is that you saw.
So you don't lose.
Okay, that makes sense. And at least in my experience, the very process of writing often continues the evolutionary process. I mean,
Yes.
I get further insight just, maybe not insight, whatever. I get further something just by trying to clearly articulate what I've learned so far. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it also prevents you from accidentally losing something that's very important but very ephemeral.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And that's why we have the 6th point where it is. After you have recorded your thoughts, you share them.
Mm-hmm.
You put them out in the world. It becomes a matter for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
First you talk. You go to your teacher or you go to your work group and say, I read this text. Here's what I've gotten from it so far. And you lay it out as clearly as you can from your notes. And then you get to the listening part, which is taking in the feedback.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if you do that, then you get to full-on insight. Part of the problem is that we're using the same word for several different things here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but like,
Yeah, but it's a problem because English doesn't have enough words.
yeah, like inspiration as opposed to insight, and understanding as opposed to knowledge.
All of this stuff. We need a technical glossary. I'm working on it slowly but surely.
So we have a few comments.
Okay.
Nick said 5 connects to 7 and 8, and I think that's where they were talking about receiving inspiration from which insights might come.
Yep.
And
Yeah, the
Dave
listening and the insight become predicated on what you record. You know, because your recording is going to be, by definition, limited. You are going to put down the things that you think are important, and you are going to not put down the things that you don't think are important. Which is why you want to get to the sharing, because the other people can give you fresh eyes to maybe see some things that you overlooked.
Then David says, 8 going to 2 is the receiving of insight that then allows one to work more deeply with the meditation on words. Because once one has begun to see the difference between living and dead knowing.
Yes.
Because one has begun to see the difference. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Aaron says, a beginner can know how something works. A master understands why it works. In a way, at least.
Yeah.
Ahmed
That's
said,
the old joke about hitting the machine, $5. Knowing where to hit, $9,995.
Yep. Okay. Ahmed says, do I have to practice this in all the stages while I'm awake? Could I, for example, practice seeking inspiration and then sleep and practice watching with my subconscious mind while sleeping and it
Nope.
on me in the dream?
Nope. Nope.
So this has to be done while.
This has to be done in a state of awakeness, in a state of presence. You cannot rely on your unconscious mind to work on this in that way, because there's too much detritus in it. I like that word, detritus. Detritus is the word of the day. There is too much detritus in the unconscious mind. You need to get into, for lack of a better term, your superconscious mind.
Okay. And then Aaron just points out the challenge of semantics. That's a
Yes. The challenge of semantics is a thing, because I cringe at the term superconscious mind.
Okay, so let's take a look at this point 8 then. So now there's this insight, which I think of as kind of a cognition, as an aha type moment. Now, is that complete? In my experience, even the most fundamental cognition, few days, few months, few years down the road will turn out to have been incomplete. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, is this...
1 second. Did you get that person, Kyle?
I did. It was
Okay.
Tom Barclay. Hi.
So anyway, go on.
No, okay. I mean, so I'm wondering, is that insight which happens at point 8, is that like a complete endpoint, or is that a stop on the stage? Because at least in my experience, very often what I find is that this insight comes. It feels very satisfying, very deep, but a few days later, a few months later, a few years later, it turns out to have been partial. And it's almost like a beginning of a new cycle at that point. And I'm wondering, in the system you're describing here, what...
I'm not sure that that's even relevant to this. The insight is whatever you get. If you get another insight the next day, that's another insight.
Okay, so it's presumably possible I could be reading this text, going through this whole cycle, coming up with an insight and understanding of that piece of text. And tomorrow I might read that text again and come to a new and different insight about that text. Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't know. Try. See. Tell me what happens.
I mean, in my experience, that has been the case sometimes. So
Okay. Well, then sometimes maybe that's the case.
Okay.
This is not dogmatic. This is a practice. I am not going to tell you this is going to happen this way.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that us being human, we tend to be fallible, and we might not get all the stuff. There might be more stuff to get from any given story that you might pick up later, you might not. Or you might get the entire meaning of the story. I know with the Dance of the New Moon, when people get it, they get it. There are little nuances to the story that you can teach them, but when they get the story, they get the story. There is no halfway getting the story. It's like, you don't get a little bit of gnosis and you don't get a little bit pregnant. It's like, it's an all or nothing thing.
Okay.
Okay, more thoughts, more questions. Mark, this is all your fault. Tell me what you think.
Well, I love Lectio Divina. It's, in the Christian mystic sense, it's the living word. So I think everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me. I've really utilized this practice a lot myself.
Mm.
And again, the manner in which I learned it from the Benedictine monastery way is, first, they say it's in 4 steps. So, first comes reading, then comes meditation, and then comes prayer and, contemplation. So I think what's really important is that the insights come in as though it's a felt sense, not a cognitive experience. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, you practice as though you're there. And one of the times that I've had a very powerful Lectio experience was as I was reading about Jesus teaching his disciples in the vineyard about the idea of what it means to be pruned. And so there I was, in the area with Jesus and the disciples, and I had a sense of smelling the smells that were there, the Mediterranean air, it was very powerful. It was very moving. And it's very personal. So it becomes that personal connection, direct experience, living word. Yeah.
That does sound very powerful.
Yeah, like I said, I am pretty sure that some Sufis were hanging out with some monastics at some point and found out about this and liked it so much that they grabbed it and filed off the serial numbers, gave it a new paint job. Because the first 4 steps are basically identical to Lectio Divina. It's
Yeah.
the last steps that are additions, and they don't mess with the Lectio Divina. They just create community around it.
We did that as well. I mean, I did it when I was going through the spiritual formation program. And we did talk about it with the group that I was part of. So that was probably a little bit different from as usual. But what would be helpful for me is to have a little better understanding of the moving lines and how this progresses on the moving lines.
Okay, so the moving lines are, in a certain sense, the moving lines in this are the teacher's point, just like they are the chef's point in the kitchen. So if I'm teaching you this process, I look at you and I go, okay, you have found the desire to have a Gnostic understanding of this this particular work. So I get you at the read, and I'm looking at that for 2 things. One, to get you to the watching, and the other to get you to the listening. So I have to get you to, I have to teach you to meditate and seek inspiration in such a way that it leads to the watching. And the watching is exactly what you described. It is that direct first-person experience of the event. It's sitting at Ibn al-Arabi's feet and listening to him tell you this stuff. It is standing in the garden with the Prophet. You know, it's whatever whatever you're reading. It's sitting in the Semakhana, watching the dance. It's sitting on Mullah Nasruddin's donkey with him, or at least walking beside him as he rides his donkey backwards. So the moving lines for that on the right side of the Enneagram are all about getting you to that watching state. So at Read, I know I want you to be able to listen. I want you to be able to accept the feedback of your teacher and or your fellow students. And I want you to be able to experience this directly in the watching, or the contemplation, as the monks say. When I move to 2, to the meditate, again, the meditation is designed to make it real enough for you to watch it. And that is in preparation for the insight. First shock, is the seeking inspiration. 4, when you're there, you're looking back along those 2 lines to the read and meditate, pulling from them to create the watching. Leaping across the void, leaping across the equator from 4 to 5. You start recording, which is where your cognitive mind begins to enter into this process again. And as you're recording, you're looking at 2 things. You need to record in such a way that you can express this as an insight, and that you can express it clearly enough that you can listen to the feedback, that you are expressing what you're doing in a way that the feedback becomes possible. Then the second shock, the sharing, the community enters. You sit with your teacher and you say, this is what I learned. And you make yourself vulnerable to the feedback of the teacher, which can be very scary. I can think of times when Kyle was terrified to tell me things that she had figured out.
Yep.
Yep. And she did it anyway.
After much hemming and hawing.
Yeah, there was some hawing. And then the 7-to-1 line is very, very important, which is after the listening, you return to the reading, either the same passage or a different one. But you use the feedback that you've gotten from the sharing to expand your ability to read these texts. The insight leads you into deeper meditation. And it's all about the gnosis. It's all about the sacred insights. So does that help to see the moving lines a little bit better, or am I being too obscure still?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Phew.
Thanks, Mark. Are we ready to move on to the next question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Ahmed asks, could the reading be the zikr that is assigned to me through my sheikh/teacher/mentor?
No.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
I am opening to the inspiration of why that's no. When you see me pausing like that, that's going, okay, God, help me out here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let me get back to where I can actually see everybody. So a zikr is usually not more than 1 or 2 words or a phrase. It's not a story. It's not a text. It's not a lecture. This is specifically for working with sacred texts or sacred stories. So while you could use this for something as simple as a zikr could be part of the Quran. It could be an ayat. It could even be one of the short surahs, but it's a different process. When you are doing zikr, you should just be doing zikr. You should not be doing it with the sense of trying to get some sort of insight into its meaning. But if you have a sheikh who has assigned you a zikr, you should take this up with them and ask them, because they're going to be telling you better than I could be telling you.
Ahmed says, but there is a button in the ayat.
Yes, there is a button in the ayat. This is not the process for finding that. I mean, if you want to say, take the light verse and use this process on that, you can get to the button in that verse. But if you use that verse as zikr, sitting and repeating it, that's different. It's a different process. Okay, from Ilmar, quick definition of zikr. Zikr is the practice of, in most cases, it's either verbal or nonverbal repetition of divine names, or a short verse from the Quran, or things like that are done as a meditative practice, sort of like mantra. Not quite, but sort of. So if I if I'm assigned to do a zikr by my teacher, I may take my tasbih. This is a tasbih. It's a little way of keeping count of where you are. For those of you who went through the precepts, you remember the remembrance of number, or the pause of number. This is useful for that. So I'm sitting here, and I'm sort of like doing the rosary. I'm telling my beads, and I'm repeating to myself, say, a couple of divine names. I may be going, Ya Hai, Ya Qayyum, Ya Hai, Ya Qayyum, over and over again, focusing on the meaning of that, letting it enter into me. The process that we're talking about is different than the process of doing zikr.
Should I just, was that clear enough, Ahmed? Yeah, mostly. I mean, it'll probably piece itself together, yeah. Dave says, I have used the 6 point for a number of years now with Michael, Fred, Will, and others. It has been exceptionally useful and somewhat creates a hive mind, but in a good sense of that, whereas the research takes on, where the research takes on a life of its own. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Community is very, very important. When we talk about the Sufi way of health and longevity, one of the 7 points is community. Living and studying in community with other like-minded or unlike-minded seekers. So yeah, that part is very, very powerful. And I think that in some ways, that is the real powerful addition that the Sufis did to the original Lectio, is to turn it into a kind of community process with feedback.
Any other questions
Thoughts, comments?
or thoughts? Yeah.
I was looking at the Enneagram and wondering why the 369 triangle is behind the moving lines.
Because it is an artistic representation, and I had a choice of either putting it in front of the moving lines or behind the moving lines, or trying to interweave the moving lines between them. That last part was more work than I wanted to do, so I did it that way. That's why.
Okay.
There is no hidden meaning to that.
You know,
Other than that sometimes I might be a little bit lazy.
Right. Okay.
You were going to say, Ilmar?
well, I was going to say that, I mean, I'm personally finding this emphasis upon community really very useful, because I've been primarily a solo practitioner. So when I have done something like this, I never, or very rarely ever have gone to this sharing step, just because I have not had a community in that sense.
Yeah.
I can really see its value, you know. So, I mean, that's definitely one of the takeaways I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you see that even right here. You know, we've created an odd little community right here in this. The same people show up every month, or every week, and every month, and we relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that relating has deepened over time. I mean, if you think about it, the way we communicate with each other has gotten a lot deeper than like the first few talks. Well, the first few talks we did, I couldn't even talk with you guys. You had to write comments, and then Kyle would have to text me to say, pay attention to the damn comments.
Now it's tough on everyone, I think, because no one
Yeah.
could really,
Yeah.
it wasn't a back and forth. It was us
Yeah.
trying to.
Yeah, and doing this in real time is for me, it is so much more satisfying and so much more meaningful than just sitting and talking to my computer and hoping that somebody is getting it.
Yeah, yeah. So I've always found great value in dialogue, but I've seen dialogue primarily as interaction between 2 points. And that's a little short of community. I think that there's a certain energy that the community provides, even if they're not engaged, each member of the community is not engaged in a dialogue process.
Yeah.
But it's all like, I find dialogue extremely important. I mean, as you noticed in our own talks, but this community thing is a new addition and a very valuable addition.
Yeah, even if not everybody within the circle speaks at any one time, their energy is there.
Yeah, yeah.
And to the extent that they are awake within the circle, they are adding their energy into the process. If they're, just nodding off and thinking about what they're going to have for dinner, they might as well not even be there. But if they're actually present in the circle, then they add something valuable, even if they don't say a word.
That's true, and they also creates a more vulnerable space. I mean, because you have an audience in a sense,
Yes.
and they could boo, as opposed to cheer,
Yeah, and that's why the second shock, the sixth shock, is the relating this stuff to the group and the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Sufis have this thing called sohbet. Sohbet means conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens at point 6 and point 7 is there is an actual conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice.
More thoughts?
Much talk. There's actually another variation of this practice that the American Quakers do. They call it the Clearness Committee. And it's very specific to having some kind of internal conflict or something that's not coming clear to you as far as moving into some of the questions that you might have or having an understanding come. So the Quakers would call people from their community together, and they would do this process. But when it came time to have the conversation, it would be to gain an understanding of a specific conflict going on at that time. So it's about discernment. And I have found that I've participated in some Clearness Committee experiences, both as one who is seeking clarity and also one who has been asked to be part of the feedback loop. Very, very helpful.
That's very cool. I didn't know about that because I actually don't know that much about Quakers. The only thing I know about Quakers is oatmeal.
Yeah. they might include that, but I haven't seen that with anybody myself. Yeah, the Quakers sit sometimes for hours together to help with that process.
Yeah.
And the one who is trying to gain awareness or expanded awareness sits in the middle of a circle. So there's some symbolism for that as well.
Talk about being put on the spot.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, we have one from Nancy.
Go, Nancy.
Nancy says, speaking of vulnerability, do people ever do what seems to be a reasonably honest job of seeking inspiration, but then come back with something that seems to be low quality to their group?
I have to say that would depend on the group.
Okay.
If you have a good group, they are not going to judge your inspiration. If you have a good teacher, he's not going to allow that, or she's not going to allow that to happen. Yeah, remember, value judgment doesn't really enter into this process.
Okay, let me see if there's another possible correspondence here. In my experience, at least, when this insight comes, there's a feeling of like an energetic rearrangement almost. There's a feeling of confusion sort of flowing out. It's not. I mean, there's something tactile about it, and I'm wondering whether that's just unique to the way I experience it, or whether that's more common.
I don't know. Let's take a poll. Anybody else experience that in that way?
I
I
mean,
guess
I
it's
definitely experience a shift
No. Okay.
when I feel like I've uncovered something. I definitely feel some kind of. I'm sorry. Are you having a hard time? Are you having a hard time hearing me, Omar?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
All right, that's all right. Just let me know. I would say I experienced something similar to that. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same, but when I'm going through a process of, I mean, I remember reading Dance of the New Moon, and when I realized I had figured it out, quote unquote, I felt different. It was kind of like a some kind of shift, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not just conceptual shift. It's for me. It's feels like almost an energetic shift. You know. And
Yeah.
just, yeah.
I would say that too. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, and I suspect that kind of experience in one form or another would not be that uncommon.
Yeah. Aaron says for him it depends on the nature of the insight, and I'd say that's probably true too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you say, Dave?
I like it. I like the seeing it on the Enneagram. I've had this experience, and to see it all mapped out makes a lot of sense, particularly with the moving lines, which I had not tabulated, but I've had the experience before. In terms of just what Aaron was mentioning, there's definitely a number of different order of insights that can be got from this. And I particularly liked the bit when you were talking about how the teacher uses the moving lines. I've done something similar in training people, but to have the actual clarity like that is very useful.
Yeah, that is one of the values of this, is that it is a model that allows for repeatability. Because processes don't do you any good if they just happen randomly. Yeah, so with this, you can take a person and sit them down and train them in this process, and they will be able to then use it to gain all manner of insight. And it will be repeatable. So here's my challenge to you all. Go back to the Dance of the New Moon and reread it using this methodology. See what you get. Many of you have not answered the question yet.
So
All right.
more thoughts
Yes.
before you
Okay.
close off. Yeah, Aaron wants to say that often, depending on the insight, it can be a sense of relief that comes up for him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Tom says, what does Tom say here?
Tom says, when I'm grappling for solutions to problems, things that involve wide-ranging gatherings, I sometimes have the feeling of clunk, as if something landing in both hands. Had one today regarding planning an event.
Sounds like it to me.
Yep.
Yeah, I can actually kind of relate to the clunk experience, though for me it's more often a shpoing. Something just pops up.
I had a friend use the word zoink today for the experience, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we all have a... Tom says that's because you're a swordsman.
That could be.
All right, so you were going to close up, I think. What did you want to say?
I was going to do the commercial.
The commercial.
Yes, the commercial. We have to do the commercial. All right. So, still have a couple of slots open for my ongoing special, where you get the opportunity to spend 6 hours talking to me for the cost of 3 hours talking to me. And soon, very, very soon, you will also get the same opportunity with Kyle.
Yep, I'm just about ready.
She's just about ready. Yeah. So there is that. And anybody who's interested, just contact me by messenger and I'll give you the particulars. But it's basically you get 6 hours worth of talking, training, counseling, bad jokes, silly puns, and general goofing about. And some people have found it useful. So there's that. We have just finished up the Enneagram of the Chief Feature, and Kyle and I are going to polish that and add a few things to it and then put it up on the interwebs for sale, which will be exciting for those people who missed it. Though anybody who was there is still going to get whatever we add to it as part of their package as well. Yep. So it's not like we're going to turn everything around and put the secret stuff in and make you pay for it twice.
Nah, that's dumb.
No.
Don't do that.
The next, I'm pretty sure that the next class that we're going to do of the really important stuff is going to be what I talked about last night, which is what I'm calling the way of the nomad, the Sufi method of longevity and robust health. Kyle is going to be up here working with me on that all next week.
Yep.
And we're going to put that out, and it's going to be very exciting and very cool, and I'm totally jazzed by that. So stay tuned for announcements on this. And am I missing anything?
No, I can think of right now.
Yeah, we have a bunch of stuff that's in the works, things that we have promised you guys that we're going to do, that we're actually going to do as time allows. So a bit different Enneagrams being written up. We're going to do the practices for each of the 9 steps of the teachers, things like that, for those of you who were involved in that. It's all still there, all still good.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Aaron says, I'm excited for that Way of the Nomad program, and Dave says, yeehaw. So
yeah, I'm excited for it too. It's something I've been working on. You know, I probably couldn't have done it till now, because when I was young, I can't really talk about longevity. You know, at 20 or 30, you don't know that much about it. But now, you know, I'm sneaking up on 70. I might know a thing or two about longevity. So finally got enough experience that I can say something.
There you go.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you very much for coming. I am going to end the recording now, and we will sign off until next Sunday.